Okay, I'm ready.
All right, so hello everyone. Today we invite you to listen to a pre-recorded event by Kevin Schindwolf. Kevin is a licensed professional counselor from Texas. He received his master's degree in clinical psychology from the University of Houston Clear Lake and his bachelor's degree in psychology from the University of Texas at Austin. Kevin has and does treat adults with autism spectrum disorder, and he will be giving us some insight tonight. So my first question is, what types of populations within autism have you treated? Adults, children, men, or women?
Mostly teens and adults, and both men and women.
Okay. And what are some misconceptions about autism?
Well, I think with families, I think the most common misconception is that somehow people, and I think it's not just with autistic spectrum, issues, it's also any mental health, because we can't see mental health, so it's intangible. And people just assume that we can help our symptoms, that this is preventable and they should just, why can't they get it? Whatever behaviors we're trying to correct or, improve on, or whatever, depression we're trying to ease, why are they so sad? People just don't seem to have as much ability to empathize with things that they can't see, such as somebody who is physically disabled. People tend to have a lot less ability to connect or understand, and sometimes they get anxious and upset. That's what probably the biggest misconception is, that this is somehow under their control, under, person diagnosis control.
Yeah, I think that's definitely true. So a question we had from one of our members was, there's been recent data that suggests that autistics are more likely to experience depression compared to neurotypicals. In your opinion and experience, why do you think that is?
Isolation, feelings of, the world not understanding or caring to understand, especially people that are close, parents even sometimes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And also, if I might add, sometimes I've noticed that the dating world is a challenge enough for all of us. But it can especially be a challenging, world as well for folks dealing with this issue. And I've seen a lot of struggles with that, and that causes depression as well, and anxiety.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure it does. Okay, what else? So what are some therapies that work well for autism, like cognitive behavioral therapy, talk therapy, trauma focused? Which one do you think has worked the best?
Well, I'm a CBT guy, so I would go with CBT. If you're dealing with children, a lot of times it could be ABA. But with adults and teens, I would say mostly CBT has been the most effective.
Yeah.
And if there has been, obviously you can tell by doing CBT. An experienced therapist could tell you if there's trauma associated, then you could advance that to also doing trauma work as well if needed.
Yeah. And could you give just like a little description of what CBT is, so we can all understand?
It's kind of just in the most, I want to go into a hour-long lecture here. It's finding your thoughts and matching them to behaviors, behaviors that you have and thoughts that you have, and trying to get sometimes matching belief systems that your mind creates, and how does it affect your behaviors, how you interact with the world, and how others interact with you, and how do we interpret all that in our mind, and how do we change those behaviors as well. It's working with both, not just your thoughts, but also the things that you do as well, how you manipulate the world, and not manipulate, not in a bad way, but just interact with the world and how that changes you internally. And we try to link those things up, at least I do. Try to not always change both, but at least find more appropriate behaviors if needed, or how to change those thought patterns as well, such as, negative belief systems that we create.
Mhm. Yep. And then another question we have is, what are some struggles that adults on the spectrum face, and how can they combat them?
I've seen a lot of struggles, like I said earlier, with the dating world, and I've also seen struggles with jobs, interacting with folks that, finding a job that is, provides enough of a, comfort for them, as well as, them perceiving what others in the workplace are doing, especially in a chaotic work environment. And I would say the best way to combat those things is to find a good, solid therapist that you build rapport with, that can help you work through those issues as they come up, and just be open and honest and talk about, the feelings that I have, as well as, how I'm interacting with others and what their responses are to me, and working through that with a therapist together, and taking the time to have that open, honest relationship with someone who can help navigate, who also understands what the patient is going through, not just try to fix them, but also understand them. That's another misconception that people, they just want to fix somebody instead of try to connect with them.
Yeah, definitely.
Sorry, that was kind of a rambly answer.
No, you're okay. And so what do you think autistic adults can do at work to improve their situation, like accommodations wise? Do you think there's any accommodations they could ask for?
I would say the ability to step away at times, to have a place they can, whether it just be out in the hall or to their car, just the ability to walk away if things get too much. Also, if they need to have something like, music or things that make them comfortable, that they can bring to work. Not anything extravagant, but just music, I would say is one that a lot of people, I've got a guy right now who's on the spectrum, and he had a job where they did not let him listen to his music because they had internet restrictions, and he was at a different office prior where he could listen to music, and that was very upsetting for him.
I'm sure.
That they took that away, and didn't allow him to, compensate for that, or have something else in the, on the backup. So I think that also having an open, honest relationship with a supervisor, or some sort of a HR representative that you kind of trust, that you can talk about that stuff with.
Yeah. And do you think I know this is like a loaded question, kind of like it depends on the person and the situation, but do you think that autistics should disclose their autism before they get hired, or should they not? Do you think it affects employment?
I personally do,
Yeah, I think
because I have a visual disability, and I tried that for a while, where I would reveal, thinking that I was open and honest, and that was the best way to go, and felt that I didn't get hired because of that. Now I can't prove it, but I feel that you don't owe employers that. It's not legal. They don't ask you that kind of stuff in the questionnaires of the applications, and it's not legal for them to do it, so you don't have to tell them. But if you start suffering from symptoms of some kind, no matter what your issue is or diagnosis is, no matter what your struggles are, then you do have to say something, do have to say, if I were to get hired and need some visual aid equipment, that I maybe not thought I had before, I would go tell them. They can't fire me for it.
Yeah, that's true. So someone would be able to not disclose it and then still get accommodations after? Or would there's no problem with that?
I think anytime, from what I understand, I'm not an HR person, but from what I understand, I'm not an expert in job law, but from what I understand is I do not have to disclose a disability in the job interview process as personal information. But if I do need accommodations once I'm hired, then yes, I do need to disclose that so that I can be an effective employee.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really sad that disability has an effect on employment, even though it's like literally illegal, but it's very hard to prove, so that can be really hard. I know the unemployment rate for disabled people in general is high, but for autistic adults, it's very high.
Yes.
Yeah. I guess I'll just have one more question for you. What are some common comorbidities in autism that you see? Like, do you commonly see depression, anxiety, things like that?
Both, yes. Depression and anxiety are both extremely high.
Yeah. And what are some techniques that they can use to combat those?
Well, I'm always a firm believer in meditation, whether it's some sort of religious meditation or transcendental meditation, or even just regular progressive relaxation techniques are a good way to go. Also, getting into therapy if it becomes too much, and learning coping skills with your therapist, such as, thought stopping, even trauma work if that's something that's needed, or even, special types of therapies like dialectical behavioral therapy, which most likely you wouldn't need in autistic spectrum disorder, but
Depends.
if there's also, but you never know. You have to, judge each case as it comes. But
Yeah.
I would say at the most basic level, be sure that journaling is also good. Keeping a log of your thoughts that, eventually if you do get into therapy, you can take to your therapist and kind of look at the thought patterns that you have, belief systems that you build, cognitive structures that you create.
Yeah.
That are mostly false, by the way, because anxiety is mostly driven by the need for us to have ultimate control of our environment, which we never really get. So, unfortunately.
Yeah. And then I know I said it was the last question, but I have one more because a lot of members ask this. How can you find like a good therapist, and like what does a good therapist look like?
What do they look like?
No, like with like traits, like
Oh, great. Well, I would say there's a ton of, the internet is your best resource if you don't have word of mouth. Your first place you should go is word of mouth. If you know of somebody you trust, that you've known for a while, and maybe even knows a little bit about what you're going through, and they have somebody they know, whether through a friend or even through personal experience of their own, that may be your first start. Second would be, the internet. Tons of websites geared towards finding therapists, Psychology Today being the biggest. Most therapists, counselors, social workers are registered on Psychology Today. And so you can find profiles in your area, just put in your zip code, and they will list their specialties on there. So if autistic spectrum disorder stuff is on their list, that would probably be a good thing. But also people who specialize in depression and anxiety, family dynamics, things like that. What does a good therapist look like? Well, I would say each person is going to judge for themselves. It's who you bond with. Who do you feel the most connected with? Sometimes, I would say if you feel moderately connected to a therapist, you should continue to go, because that means the relationship has the potential to build. Not all relationships start really strong right off the bat. Sometimes they take a little bit of time. If you go in there and it's swing and a miss, then don't go back. And if it's a swing and a miss, if that person just doesn't listen or doesn't empathize with you, doesn't seem to be able to relate back to you what you're talking about. Maybe they make it about themselves, or they just miss it altogether,
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's hard, especially I'm autistic, and I don't seem autistic at all by what I look like. I mean, I know that sounds dumb. Or how I communicate, because I'm an adult and I've learned communication skills. And I've had many psychiatrists, therapists, if they don't specialize in it, they're like, who diagnosed you? And I'm like, 5 psychologists. I'll show you my paperwork, but they won't believe me. And I think that's a huge barrier too with autistic adults who can communicate well, or it looks like they can communicate well,
Right. But I would say too, it might be a barrier, but it may not be the only barrier. It might be just that might be a therapeutic tool to use. I didn't, if I were your therapist and didn't know right away, and you gave me, obviously, yes, I've been diagnosed, and I would find it interesting to explore, where are those symptoms at? And if you're able to be so successful now, with interacting and the things you've learned through your therapy over the years, then, I think that would be something to what is still hindering you, and what are you coming in for? It might be a slight barrier, but I think it could also be a potential growing, opportunity for the therapist to learn and listen.
Yeah.
If your therapist is closed off, is I don't see it.
Then
I don't see it at all. I think you're misdiagnosed. That might be an issue.
Yeah, that definitely is an issue. And I mean, I think it can help that I can communicate well, in therapy.
Sure.
But part of the problem is that autistics like me, we mask so much, and we're basically acting, which so that's still detrimental too. So there's still reason to be in therapy, because the stress of acting neurotypical can be a lot.
And I think that would be huge. Then as your therapist, I think one of the things I would do is what does that mask look like? Tell me what that looks like. In its strongest form. What do you do to mask that the most, and what's underneath there? And we got to get to that so that we can work with that. And it's probably good that sometimes the therapist sees the mask, and also but has to be open to the fact that there is a underneath to that. And
yeah,
a lot of people always want to just see the best, and I think you're fine, you're good, you seem to do so well, but you may not be, because you're struggling at something and you're just able to cover it up good because you have lots of good coping skills, but may still be one that's needed to learn.
Yeah, definitely. So is there anything else you wanted to tell us about your practice and just working with autistic individuals?
I'm always open for new clients in the Houston, Texas area. If you need help, look me up on Psychology Today, or if you're even a resident of Texas now, we seem to be able to do some telehealth for a while, at least insurance-wise. That's the other thing I didn't mention. If you still can't find a therapist that way, you can call your insurance as well. if you have insurance, and they can help you find it too. They sometimes have a provider finder. But you know, I really enjoy working with autistic spectrum folks. I find it very rewarding to learn and grow as a professional with them, and hope to have more come to see me, you know, with issues that I can help them with, hopefully.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for all of your great insight and advice.
Thanks for having me.
Of course. And then the recording will be up on our site and probably our YouTube, if that's okay with you. And then I can send you the link and you can see it later.
Cool. Awesome.
So I'll stop recording now. Have a good night. And
is the recording over?
Here, I'll end it right now. All right.